Welcome, everyone. This is the Parents Reaching Out podcast. We're here to share information, resources, and real conversations that empower families, youth, caregivers, educators, and professionals to build strong partnerships, navigate services with confidence, and become their own best advocate. Today, we are really excited to be discussing how to prepare for your IEP meeting. I'm Jen Dinelli. I'm the Executive Director with Parents Reaching Out, and today I have the lovely pleasure of having
Leah Johnson. I am the Education Director at Parents Reaching Out. So thanks, Jen, for inviting me to talk about preparing for IEPs.
I'm excited to hear from your expertise, Leah. But before we get started, I'd like to just do a brief disclaimer, as we all know those things are important. Just to let everybody know, the information shared in this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or professional advice. Every family and every situation is unique, so we encourage you to consult with the appropriate professionals regarding your individual circumstances. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official position of Parents Reaching Out or our funding partners. Now that I have that out of the way, let's get started with our conversation on preparing for an IEP meeting. So, Leah, I know you have had the opportunity in your past experience to sit in on a ton of IEP meetings. So, what would be your starting advice for families?
Well, I was a teacher for almost 30 years. So, like Jen said, I have been in a lot of meetings and listened to a lot of things. I feel like the starting point, from my point of view, would be to review the students' older IEP that I have as a teacher. And hopefully, if I'm the child's teacher for this coming year, that I will get the IEP before school starts and have a chance to look it over before the IEP meeting. Now, Jen, I know that you're a parent of a student with a disability. What do you think you would tell parents about that?
No, I loved what you said. I think a big piece I always do is pull out the last IEP and just start reviewing it and marking anything I might have questions on. I know a big section I like to go through is the goals, really looking at the progress that's been added to them and seeing if the goal has been met. Maybe I'll mark in there that we need to maybe discuss what the new goal will be. Or if I've noticed, if you have a student that's a little bit older and has had a few IEPs. Like my daughter, she's a sophomore, so we've had plenty of IEPs under our belt. If she's had the same goal for several years, maybe we need to have a discussion on switching it up a little bit. Maybe that one's not particularly working. So I definitely make sure I go through and mark any of those that I think is necessary. And then I think the next big piece I like to go through is the parent and student input section. And I know I've learned this even from just my own experience of going into my first IEP and they sit you down and you're so nervous. And the first thing they're like, what are the goals and inspiration that you have for your kid? And you're just sitting there as a parent like, oh my gosh, I was so nervous about this meeting. I didn't think about this. And so I've learned over the years to help myself really think about that beforehand without all these people staring at me and putting me kind of on the spot to really think not just within the year, but even broader picture of what I see for in the future for her and make sure to put that down. And as she got older and I felt like she could have a little bit more input, including her statement into what she wanted on the IEP to share with the entire team. So that's where I get started with getting prepared.
And Jen, do you talk to your daughter before the IEP about what goals she thinks she needs now that she's older? Because I felt like in IEPs that I had with older students that they have some really good ideas of what their goals should be. What do you think that would look like for parents listening to this podcast?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's really important to tailor it to your own kid with what their age level is and their cognitive ability and not overwhelming them. But I think it's really important for students to understand the purpose of an IEP and taking some time before your meeting to let them know, like, hey, I'm having this meeting. This is who's going to be there. Seeing if they even want to attend, even for a minute or two, or even the whole meeting, whatever they feel comfortable with, to kind of provide their own input We definitely, I think I started just building on that as she got older and could have a little bit more input. But the first things we always would really cover is the accommodation section, just because I'm not in the classroom as a parent, so I don't always see what's working. But to really hear from her, like, oh, I really like it when they would give me this pencil grip. It was really helpful when they let me sit in a separate desk for testing. Excuse me, any of those things to get her insight what she liked. Or I think at one point they tried like a weighted vest with her. She's like, I didn't like that, mom, because all the other students could see me being different. And I think it's really important to have those insights. So I think I'm just starting gradually with what you think your child can understand and where they can have input, and then of course building on that, because I truly think the ultimate goal is that they can eventually really lead this meeting and have a huge say in their education. Now that she's in high school, I know a lot of the times the teachers will look at me and be like, well, do you think she should be in this class or this class? And I'll look at her and be like, well, what do you think? Where do you want to be? Which one
Yeah.
sounds better to you? Because I'm not the one doing the work. I'm not the one in the classroom. So I think she can have a better way of learning how to advocate for herself in those situations.
And also, I think that the progress toward goals
Mm,
is a good one to talk
yeah.
with older students, maybe even younger students, because they know if that goal seems like it's a good goal for them. And so I think that that would be a really good place to talk to her before the IEP and make her comfortable with that. Also, I wanted to ask you how to, does it feel weird having your kid in the meeting and you're like talking, a lot of people are talking about your kid? Because I think as a parent, I think that would be kind of awkward to have your kid sitting there and everybody's discussing your child in front of them. And maybe some people don't really include the child in the conversation.
I think it's interesting because I think when she was younger, I was a lot more nervous about her being in the room. And I think the first time she really started attending was like in fourth or fifth grade was when we started
Mhm.
her come to the meeting. And honestly, I wish I would have started it sooner. And my advice would be to parents, if your kid is up for it and if you're up for it, having them there, even if it's not for the whole meeting, if it's just to kind of introduce themselves and share a little bit about them, I would do it, because I think it changes the whole atmosphere in the room. Because a lot of times, when the person you're talking about is in the room, you're going to be so much more cognitive about how you're stating things because they're there to hear it. Whereas opposed to when they're not there, and we all know sometimes what's said can be really hard for us to hear. But when they're there, we tend to reverbalize it in a way of being super helpful. And that's really what I think the atmosphere should always be. But sometimes I think that does take a little bit more effort. So we choose to not necessarily always do that. But yeah, and I think now that she is there, particularly as she's gotten older, it's been helpful for her to learn even more about the support she has. And sometimes she doesn't even know all of her options. And so her knowing that has empowered her to advocate, particularly like when she has testing accommodations and they're not providing them. She'll be like, excuse me, teacher, I have these accommodations. I'm supposed to go into a separate room. And she knows it now. Whereas if she wasn't attending it, she probably wouldn't remember that and to know to state that to the
Mhm.
teacher.
And what about we have parents that call us, they go, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about coming to my IEPs. How do you as a parent get over your nerves about IEPs, and do you have suggestions for that and what they could do to help themselves in that way? And if there is something that you can do or something that you can bring, do you have to let the IEP team know that you're bringing your mother or whoever to the IEP with you? How does that work?
Yeah, I think contrary to probably what people think, even as the executive director, I still get nervous going to IUP meetings. I think it's just human nature. But I think a big piece, as my time at working at Pro, one of the big things we really try to let families know is you're an equal member of the team. And I don't think we always remember that. We go in there with all these professionals looking at us and we're like, oh, they know everything better than us. And really, we're all equal members because we as parents come in with the experience of our kid. We're the ones spending the most time with them. So I think that always helped me a little bit at first, knowing like it wasn't, you're not just invited as like, oh, I guess you should be here in an afterthought. Like you truly should be present there because you are an equal member, just like all the other teachers and experts in the room that are there. I think another big part of helping with the nerves is doing what we're talking about right now and preparing for it. I know a big piece is really writing down all the things I want to talk about. So when I do get there and I think I got it, and then you get nervous when you see all the people, you have something to reference. A great tool I know we have at Parents Reaching Out is our proposals and concern sheets that parents can kind of fill out. It's a great just kind of template to just get you started on how to draft up what you might want to talk about and gives you something to take with you, which that can be super helpful. You can even ask for it to be included in the IEP where they just kind of attach it so everybody gets a copy of it. I also think like what you mentioned, inviting somebody can be super helpful. Whether you're looking to have like an expert there that might have some different viewpoints and data that they can share on your child, if they're getting outside therapies, or you could even just bring a friend who is solely there to kind of be your note taker and emotional support while you're sitting there trying to keep confident and not be too nervous in that room with everybody else. It can definitely feel like that emotional support can really get you through the meeting. But those are definitely some other things I would consider when getting prepared for the meeting. And if you want the template, we were happy to, we'll link it somewhere for you to get that from our handbook. It's a great little resource tool that we offer at no cost.
Do they have to let anybody know that somebody else is coming besides just you as a parent? Or would you suggest to tell the school people that, hey, someone else is coming and let them know who it is, or is that not necessary?
I think it's best practice is what I would say is just to share with them who you intend on taking. A lot of times if it's, I know a lot of the schools are still meeting virtually just out of convenience. So a lot of times you're forwarding that meeting link. So just letting them know who it is that you're sharing it with and what role they're playing, particularly too, knowing what they're representing. If they know it is somebody with some maybe outside data, they might love to have that. I know I've tend to try to do that back and forth. So when my daughter was receiving occupational therapy outside the school, I would give them a copy of the IEP, as well as when I was preparing for an IEP, I'd have them draft up. I didn't have them attend, but I would have them draft up notes of what they've been working on to then give the school just so they know, just because I think that continuity between school, home, and outside therapies can be really helpful in your child succeeding. But yeah, I think it's definitely best practice. I don't think it's necessarily required, but I think it is best practice to just let them know so they're not blindsided either. Like, who's this walking in the door?
I think even as a teacher, it helps to know who's going to, like,
Mm-hmm.
if someone's going to come and talk about it, because I'm going, ooh, I wonder if that would really help this kid and, what they've been doing. And to hear that information is, I think, even helpful as a team member from the teacher point of view. So I really think that's a great idea. What about if your kid has, let's say they have a change in them in a medical
Mm-hmm.
status that maybe they didn't have last year, or something just recently happened. Do you have any suggestions for our families on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think you could even probably put it in your proposals and concerns that you bring, or even just taking notes on that, right? For instance, my daughter has had some vision issues, and so we'd kind of bring updates for the school on what that's looking like, or if there's recently a new allergy, that's always good to make sure it's documented. Any new surgeries or anything that could potentially affect how the student is involved in the environment in school is super helpful for them to know. And typically you can tell them right after those, but sometimes we as parents are so busy we kind of forget that time. So kind of making
Yeah.
sure you utilize the annual IUP as a time just like, oh, let me check and make sure they have all of the most recent medical information. Just a good checks and balance for us if we maybe slipped that through the cracks or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely something to make sure that you include in there can be helpful.
And also, if your child has a lot of different therapies and stuff, I would, as a parent, be probably going, "Oh no, I forgot."
Mhm.
If they, to put the information there. This is who is providing the therapy. Oh, and I can't remember their name, and then I'd be nervous, and then that would make me even more nervous. So
Mhm.
it would not be good for me for that.
Yeah. So Leah, from
Do
your
you think that there's? Oh, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
I was just going to ask you if there's anything from when you were a teacher attending a lot of the IEP meetings. What was a big thing that you saw that you wish parents kind of knew beforehand?
I think that I wish that they had have known that they have a big part of the
Mm,
IEP. I felt like, because I taught elementary on up to high school, and I felt like the parents didn't have that feeling that they were really a part of this team. And I think that would have helped them so much to be so much more confident about it.
mm,
And that's what I like about when at parents reaching out, when we talk to parents about that, that you and the child are a big part of this. And please feel like that you are, and that you can ask questions. Because I've been on IEPs where I am getting kind of, as a teacher, I was getting really mad because I felt like their questions weren't answered, and
mm,
they were kind of going, "Oh, it's okay, mom. You're really not a part of this, so we'll just talk around you." And that's what I think that they really should promote within the school, that you are a part of it, and that all your questions and concerns are valid.
mm,
Also, the other thing is, if they have something that they want and they're asking for it, and it's written in the prior written notice, and they say, "No, we're not going to do that," then please give them an
right.
explanation of why are we not doing this. I always tell the story about when I first came to New Mexico, and someone was asking for swim therapy, and the closest swimming pool is like 2 hours away. So maybe that's not realistic, but
Mm,
then you can just say that. "I'm sorry, you're new here in our community. We don't have a pool, and I don't think that we can transport your kid for 2 hours to go to swim therapy." So I think things like that that parents should know.
yeah. And I think you bring up a good point too. And it's necessarily usually more at the meeting, but knowing this prior to is helpful too, I think, to know you can ask questions. It's okay to pause the meeting and be like, I don't know what you're saying. A lot of times we'll talk about like acronym soup, right? And how all the time they're IEP,
Oh, yeah.
FBA, BIP, FE, and we're just like, what is all of this? And making sure that you as a parent feel empowered to pause in those moments and be like, what? Can you explain that to me? I think is another big point we see a lot that families don't necessarily feel like they can stop in those moments and ask those questions, but definitely feeling that way going into it.
Right. And I think that would make you, as a parent, feel more prepared for the meeting, and even as a teacher, feel more prepared for it if you knew what the acronyms were. Because even as a teacher, sometimes they would use acronyms, especially maybe outside therapists and people. I'm like, I'm writing it down and going, "I'll look that up later." But why didn't I just feel free to stop the meeting and say, "Hey, I don't understand what that is"?
Right. Yeah.
Because that would be easy. And maybe other people have the same question, but you don't want to feel silly and not know what that means. So I get that too. And I think
Absolutely.
that's a really valid point.
For sure.
Jen, do you think there's anything else that you can think of that you and your parent perspective would think for getting prepared for an IEP? What if it's your first IEP? Is there anything different that you would do?
I think a lot of the same tips apply. I think it's really important to know what we've already shared about you're an equal member of the team. I think sometimes in the first IEP, you're still establishing a lot of the data. So bringing any data you have and when we say data, I guess I should maybe unpack that a little bit more. Anything you're kind of seeing at home, any concerns or hopes that you're hoping the school can maybe cover, because sometimes we learn our kiddos will do certain things at home but not at school, do it at school and not at home. And so sometimes having those conversations while you're all in the room to be like, well, how are you getting them to do that, can be extremely helpful, on both ends. If it's you sharing your tips, them sharing their tips, but having that with you to really make sure that it's a quality IEP, because you have say in all of that. Going back to what we discussed with the goals, like that can be a huge piece that drives what type of goals you write for your child. So I think that's super important, and I think a first IEP is super helpful to bring somebody else for sure. because it can be super overwhelming. And if you sometimes are a processor like I am, sometimes your questions don't come up until a day or two later. And so having somebody there taking notes for you so that you know who to kind of maybe follow up with later when you think of those questions can be helpful. So, yeah, that's what I would state.
Great advice.
Well, Leah, thank you so much for joining me today to kind of discuss how to prepare for an
Well, thank
IEP meeting.
you.
Hopefully, everybody took some great tips. As we're wrapping up here, we like to end each conversation with the same question that we ask all of our guests, which at Parents Reaching Out, we believe everyone can be their own best advocate. So, Leah, what does being your own best advocate mean to you?
Well, I think what it means to me, I am a person with a disability, so I think it means that I have a voice and I can advocate for what works for me, especially in a meeting like an IEP. And so to me, that gives others a chance to understand that they can do the same thing.
Great answer. Thanks for sharing that. So, thank you for sharing your perspective and thank you for joining us today. To our listeners, we hope today's conversation gave you practical information, some helpful resources, and confidence to take the next step on your journey if you're getting ready for an IEP meeting soon. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a family member, friend, educator, or professional who may benefit from this. To learn more about Parents Reaching Out and explore additional resources or our trainings, visit our website or connect with us on social media. Thank you for listening to the Parents Reaching Out podcast. Until next time, stay informed, build strong partnerships, and remember, you are your own best advocate. Thanks, everybody.